Hi there. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about development issues. And I've subtitled this particular little vignette, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So, let's get straight into it, shall we? This first picture shows two primary schools. The one on the left is under some banana trees, and I think there's even a couple of citrus trees in the left of that picture. There's a bunch of kids on wooden benches. They don't have enough books to go around. They have some scribble pads, and they were thrilled when we started the primary school in Akusi. One day, it was in the rainy season, the rain was hammering down, and I saw coming down the road towards me the most unusual creature I think I've ever seen in my life. It was green on top, and it had 8 legs. And as it got closer, I realized there was a very tall kid at the front, and a very small kid at the back, and 2 other kids in the middle, and they were holding a banana leaf over their heads, and under their arm, they had their books, and they were walking barefoot through the mud to get to school. On the right is a primary school in El Salvador. The kids at this primary school were all teenagers, and they were all combatants. And the one thing they wanted more than anything, more than even possibly to win the war, which they kind of had done very well at, even though they didn't have an outright victory, the one thing they wanted was education. They believed that education would help them build a new Salvador, and most importantly, build their own new lives. And this brings me to the primacy of primary. When you're doing development, primary education, primary healthcare, what you might call primary governance, primary law and order, all the primaries will pay you back 70, 80, 90%. You can hardly go wrong with primaries. The primary is the start for whatever else they want to build on. And there's an argument to be said for pouring much more into primary and leaving secondary and tertiary to people to build on organically as they go on in their own society. I never met a primary school I didn't like. I never met primary healthcare, vaccination programs that weren't beneficial, primary governance, rooting out the obvious corruption, primary law and order, actually having constables, police officers, people able to say, stop that, get on home. Primaries are good, secondaries are challenging, tertiaries you'll inevitably get it wrong because you don't know, you're not brought up there, you're not part of that fabric. Go with the primaries, can't go wrong. So that's the good. Let me now go to the bad. Here we have some dwellings being rebuilt or having been rebuilt in East Timor. Now, if you look at the picture on the left, you'll see a beautiful corrugated iron roof. You'll see some nicely milled lumber as supports. And in the background, you'll see a traditional house being rebuilt. And the right-hand picture is what it will look like when it's finally fully thatched. Now, a lot of people who've never lived in a thatched hut will be looking at that thatched hut saying, how quaint, I love it, I'd love to live in that. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. But for sure, all of the insects, spiders, and various other bits and pieces that love to live in that, in the thatch, that spread certain diseases, ticks that drop out of the thatch at night onto sleeping children, these do love these traditional houses. So therefore, why is the corrugated iron in the bad? Well, the corrugated iron is in the bad for the same reason that the Green Revolution of the 60s and 70s was fundamentally bad. What that corrugated shed is a statement not about how to live, but a statement about the cash economy. You have to buy corrugated iron. You have to buy milled lumber. All of that stuff in the traditional house you cut from the forest. It's sustainable, and very cheap, i.e. free. The other one is not free. It demands a cash economy. Now, the Green Revolution was designed by agronomists who said, you have lovely land out here in the People's Popular and Democratic Republic of Grombulia. We get you some fertilizers, we get you some special seeds, you grow cash crops, you sell them on the world economy, lots of money comes back, you start to build schools and hospitals for yourself, blah, 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 blah. The green economy contributed more to indebtedness in the developing world than any other revolution that has happened out there. You make people addicted to cash crops. They stop doing subsistence crops. They stop practicing the traditional water conservation methods. One of the things that's devastating Afghanistan right now, not just the dreadful drug problems in the agricultural sector, but the fact that all the traditional water catchment and water conservation measures out in the distant villages, they're all abandoned by people who've gone looking for cash jobs. So when you need those underground reservoirs, when you need those drainage ditches to take what little water you have, whether it's meltwater from snow or the infrequent rainwater, it doesn't work. Double whammy. The cash economy is not the friend of the subsistence economy. So, strangely, the neat, cutesy-looking traditional house has its problems with health issues. The beautiful corrugated iron mill timber house has a real problem when in 5 years' time you've got to replace the corrugated iron because corrugated iron doesn't grow on trees. Okay, so we've had the good, that was the bad. Now let's have a look at the ugly. Here we are. Take a look at the picture on the left. What do you notice has happened to the end of that wing of that airplane? Well, it would appear that the young pilot, in turning round at the end of the dirt strip in Akusi, misjudged by about 18 inches the distance of the end of his wing from the trees at the end of the runway. It was a whoopsie. But the point was, on our dirt strip, it was a dirt strip. We didn't have so much as a set of spanners, let alone a maintenance hut. We didn't have anything whereby you could repair anything of any sort on any plane. Oh. So what did they have to do? They had to fly another plane with some bits and pieces and people who came down, one of whom was quite senior and spoke in a very brusque way to the young pilot who'd taken the 18 inches off the end of his wing. And the planes were on the ground together for a couple of days. They spent some time patching, testing, doing things that aircraft people do to make planes fly again. And they finally flew away. Big problem of resource, waste of resources and resource allocation. On the right-hand side of the picture, there is a very baffled but totally willing electronic engineer from the military battalion that were in Akusi, trying to fix something that should never have been put there in the first place. In a way, this is more tragic even than the young pilot and his wingtip. What you're looking at there is the bottom end of a reverse osmosis distiller. Now, a reverse osmosis distiller takes any kind of gunky water, you put it in, you squish that water through a membrane, all the bad stuff is left on one side of the membrane, and what comes out the other side is clean water. It's fantastic. It doesn't work necessarily very fast, but it works very sure. Well, this reverse osmosis distiller was helicoptered into the province of Akusi, and a 1,000 litre fuel tank for the generator that was going to run it, because it uses electricity, was helicoptered in. One of the 3 intact roofs in the whole province had to be broken to lower this sort of stuff into it. And after 10 days of operation, the control panel, the electronic control panel, ceased functioning. Now, normally you pop down to your local Radio Shack or electronics store and buy yourself another control panel, slot it in, and an hour later you'd be making order again. We didn't even have an electric grid in my province. We didn't have electricity for most of the time I was there. We had this temporary generators with temporary bits and pieces, and we had the willingness of certain skilled soldiers who could tell us, it is the control panel and I can't fix it. The final irony of that reverse osmosis distiller is that in many of the provinces in East Timor where there had been a certain amount of pollution, a reverse osmosis distiller would have been really quite useful. But not in Akusi. The one thing we had was a plentiful supply of clean water, and Oxfam, who are serious experts in clean water, had got a program to take that water, pipe it to various villages so that women didn't have to spend hours a day carrying water on their head. So it wasn't really necessary. It certainly couldn't be sustained, and it ran off of fuel, electricity, which we didn't have. If that's not ugly, I'm not sure what is. So, how do we sum this all up? I have said, and I'll say it again, all the primaries are good. Primary education, primary healthcare, infrastructure, governance, law and order, absolutely essential. In the complicated domain, making a virtue out of externally imposed events is not good development. You're just relying on lucky development. And again, I am struck time and time again how externally imposed events, externally imposed policies absolutely dictate what happens locally to people who never asked for it. And that is something that the humanitarians miss, and certainly the legal infrastructure, human rights people miss. Ask the ordinary people if the majority of them care about what it is your passion at the time. And if you get a 60% we care about it, go ahead. But if you're getting a 6%, you're stirring up trouble, which is not going to do anybody any good in the long run, because the moment you're gone, the 6% will be told, you can now stop that. You've had your fun in the sun. It's really very, very difficult to bring with you externally imposed values and constraints and issues. But it is the job of program managers and program directors to fight those externalities. It's not supposed to be the guy on the ground who says, we shouldn't be doing this, we shouldn't be bringing a reverse osmosis distiller to the one province that has excellent fresh water. It should be the program director saying, great in another province, but not for there. And if there's the only place you can take it, then I'm afraid we must decline your donation. Go around and ask program directors how many times they say decline your donation. Okay. The bad. In the complex domain, the implicit assumption that the cash economy is the way to go is now more than ever with climate change proving a completely false god to worship. The only way that you can do economic development realistically in places that are not your own culture is organically grown, organically locally directed, organically locally demanded development. If they lead, you follow. If you lead, you will lead them down the path of destruction. Sad, but true. And that is really all I want to say about development on this occasion with that. Thank you.